guys, Josh here. So by now, I think most of you know that in late March 2023, Nintendo will be closing the eShop for the Wii U and 3DS, making it impossible to make new purchases for games or DLC. So in this video, I would like to just take a look at what this means for fans of the Harvest Moon / Story of Seasons series, because depending on when you got into the series and the consoles that you own, you may have missed out on a few games. And if you're not super familiar with all of the games in the series, or you can't afford to get everything, it could be a bit confusing if you're looking at the 3DS or Wii U eShop, because there's so many games. So if you're trying to just pick one or two and you're not too sure which one you should get, so we're gonna go through all of that together. And also, even though we still have a whole year before the permanent closure of the eShops, it will actually be impossible to use a credit card after May 23rd, 2022. So if you don't want to go through the hassle of finding eShop gift cards, which will be accepted until August 29, 2022, there's really not that much time left. So let's start with the Wii U, and after that we're gonna take a look at the 3DS. So on the Wii U's eShop, there are 4 Harvest Moon games that you can get, all from the Virtual Console, since there was no original Harvest Moon game that released for the Wii U. So let's start with Harvest Moon for the Super Nintendo. This is the very first game in the series, which means that it's also the very first farming game. I actually played it again last month and I did a full review, so check that video out if you're interested. But currently there are only 2 official ways of playing this game. The first one, of course, would be on the Super Nintendo, and keep in mind that this game is currently selling for about $300 to $500 for a loose copy for the North American version, a bit less for the PAL version, and the Japanese one is actually the only one that's affordable. But overall, it's a pretty pricey game, and if you see it for $25, it's most likely a replica. Anyway, so the other way to get this game is, of course, through the Wii U's Virtual Console, and it is available in all regions. It's a lot cheaper, but should you get it? So I'll say what I said in my review of this game last month. I think that if you loved this game as a child, and if you have nostalgic feelings attached to it, get it while you can. And if, like me, you're a fan of the series and you want to see where everything started, I'm sure you'll find it interesting as well. But on the other hand, if you're purely looking for a farming game to spend a lot of hours on, you might not miss out too much by skipping this one. So it's not necessarily a game that I would recommend to everybody. There's only 4 crops, 2 types of animals, the dialogues are extremely simple, there's not too much to do in fall and winter, which is like half of the game. And most importantly, the game lacks quality of life features that you would expect in farming games nowadays, such as an inventory system, and you can only carry 2 tools at a time. So I think that from a historical standpoint, I think it's an important game and I had fun playing it. And also, since it's not available on the Switch or any other modern console, for me, I like having it on my Wii U, just in case I want to easily go back to it in the future. But to be honest, it's not necessarily a game I would recommend for most players. Next, we have Harvest Moon Friends of Mineral Town and Harvest Moon More Friends of Mineral Town. These are the 2 Game Boy Advance games, and they're available on the North American and Japanese eShops. And they're more or less the same game, but there are a few differences. So in Friends of Mineral Town, you play as a boy and you can marry one of the girls, and in More Friends of Mineral Town, you play as a girl and you can marry one of the boys. I think most people will base their decision on that, but there are a few other differences. So since More Friends of Mineral Town came out a bit later, it improves on the original game in a few ways. For example, the localization is a bit better and some mistakes and typos have been corrected. You can also change the color of your outfit. There are more marriage candidates, so there's actually 8 bachelors compared to the 5 bachelorettes from the original game. There's also a point system that measures the success of your farm, and you get points by doing various tasks and improving your farm and relationships. You can also sell items to one, including Van's favorite, which is an item you'll get in your mailbox and you can sell for a lot of money, and other little changes like that. So for me, I got both games, but honestly, that game has been remade under the name Story of Seasons, Friends of Mineral Town, and it's available on Switch, PlayStation, Xbox, and PC, with new graphics, quality of life improvements, new outfits, same-sex marriage, and 2 brand new marriage candidates, and a few more things. So the only big thing that's missing is the rival marriages, which I think is a bit unfortunate as it removes a few events between the different townspeople, and I think it was fun to see the other characters getting married. It was making the town a little bit more lively. But other than that, unless you're really attached to the rival system or the art style of the original game, because they redid all the portraits and everything, I would simply suggest going for the remake. And lastly, on the Wii U, there's Harvest Moon 64. So this was the very first video game I ever owned, so I'm obviously very attached to it. I'm maybe a little bit biased. And just like the Harvest Moon on the Super Nintendo, the Wii U is the only way to play this on a modern console. And the N64 cartridge is also pretty expensive. And also one interesting thing about this one is that it's on the eShop for North America, Japan, and also PAL regions, while the original game only came out for the N64 in North America and Japan. So this was the first time like European and Australian players could play Harvest Moon 64. So if you're in one of these regions, you might really want to get the Wii U version. And Harvest Moon 64 improved on so many things from its predecessor. There's a lot more things to do and lots of things to work towards, lots of different house extensions. Their festivals are fun, there are many events with the different characters and you'll get really attached to them as that game has so much charm. And while it's not as complex as recent games in the series, it has tons of secrets and trying to get all of the power berries, completing the photo album, or getting the perfect ending. This game can actually be quite challenging, and that's one of the things I really love from Harvest Moon 64. I'm currently replaying through this game and I'm having such a great time, even in 2022. And if I had to pick only one game from the Wii U's Virtual Console, it would be this one, since there has been no remakes of this game and I think it aged pretty well compared to the other ones in the series. So if you gotta pick just one of these games, I would recommend getting Harvest Moon 64. Now let's take a look over the eShop for the 3DS. So for this console, we have games from both the Virtual Console as well as original games. But let's start with the Virtual Console. So on the North American and PAL eShops, there is Harvest Moon GBC. So this was the first handheld game in the series and it came out for the Game Boy, then the Game Boy Color. And it's pretty much a watered down port of the SNES game. So remember when I said that the SNES game didn't have a lot of content? Well, this one has even less. You're pretty much restricted to your farm, meaning you can't go foraging in the mountains, you can't go to town or talk with the villagers. The only thing you'll do is take care of your farm, your crops and your cows and your chickens. I think in 1999 it might have been interesting to be able to do this on the go and have a little farm on your Game Boy. But realistically, unless you're extremely attached to that game for nostalgic reasons, I would not necessarily recommend it. Next we have Harvest Moon GBC 2. So this one is unfortunately only available on the North American eShop. You still can't get married in this game, but you can at least go out of your farm, you can visit shops, talk with villagers, go foraging, so it's a bit more interesting and might be worth picking up if you're curious in checking it out. However, I would recommend just picking up Harvest Moon GBC 3. This one is also unfortunately only available on the North American eShop. And this was the last entry on the Game Boy Color, and that's when things started getting a bit more fleshed out. In this one, you can pick between the boy and the girl character, and this will determine your life on the farm. So if you play as a boy, you'll be able to upgrade your farming tools, which will make taking care of your crops easier. And if you pick the girl, you will have a brush, milker, and you'll also be able to buy shampoo for the sheep. So you'll be well equipped to take care of the animals. The character from the other gender will be helping you on the farm, and you'll also be able to get married with them. And if you pick the boy, you can have children, but if you pick the girl, the game ends once you're pregnant, so that's a little bit unfortunate. But I think that this game is very interesting because it has lots of mechanics that are not seen in other games, and it's also a bit more fleshed out than the other Game Boy games. And most of what's in the first games will be in this one, so I think your best bet if you had to pick one of the Game Boy games is to just pick the third one. So that's pretty much it for the Virtual Console for the 3DS. Now let's talk about the 3DS games available for download, the original 3DS games. So those are also available in physical versions, but there are a few things to consider, so let's go over everything. So first we have Harvest Moon: The Tale of Two Towns. This was originally a DS game, but it was later ported to 3DS. And I actually recently started playing this one, so while I can't comment too much yet on the gameplay, I am enjoying it, but I know not everybody does. There are a few things to note, however, if you're planning on getting this game. So basically, there's the original DS cartridge that released for North America and Japan. Then there's the 3DS cartridge that came out for North America and PAL regions. And later there was an enhanced version of the 3DS cartridge that came out for Japan only. And of course, there's the digital version for the 3DS that's available in all regions. So between the DS and 3DS versions, there are a few differences, notably the increased resolution on the 3DS, a new petting minigame to increase your friendship with your animals, and a Street Pass feature to get items from other players. So if you can choose between the DS and 3DS, I think the 3DS version is better. However, a lot of players have been reporting technical issues such as the game freezing or crashing or slowing down, especially if there's lots of crops on their farm, with the North American and PAL cartridge for the 3DS. So for me, I've been playing the enhanced Japanese version, and so far everything seems fine with this one. So if you have a Japanese 3DS, that's a great way to play. But if you can't do that and you still want to get the improvements that came with the 3DS version, then I would recommend getting the digital version over the physical one so you don't have the technical issues. So make sure you do that before the eShop closes. So all of the other games are available physically, so you're not really missing out whether or not you buy them from the eShop or not. It was really just for Tales of Two Towns where you gotta be a little bit more careful. Other than that, there's Harvest Moon: A New Beginning, which I've really enjoyed. There's Story of Seasons, which is the first game after the split with Natsume, who was localizing the games until that point. So just keep in mind that going forward, all games in this series are called Story of Seasons. And if you see Harvest Moon Skytree Village or Harvest Moon The Lost Valley, that's a completely different series made by a different team, and just buy them at your own risk. Then going back to Story of Seasons, so there's Return to Popolo Croix, a Story of Seasons fairy tale, which was a spin-off between Popolo Croix and Story of Seasons. And there's also Story of Seasons Trio of Towns, which was the last entry for the 3DS, and a lot of people's favorite game. For most of these games, there are free updates available, so even though Nintendo claims software updates will still be available for the foreseeable future, we don't know what that means exactly, and it's safe to assume that this will not be forever, so I would recommend downloading all of the updates for these games, even if you're planning to just buy the physical copy in a few years. And for Trio of Towns specifically, if you have a Japanese 3DS, you can get a lot of new dialogues, 2 new marriage candidates, Wufio and Stephanie, the option to have a child with Inari, the special marriage candidate, and a few other things if you download the free updates. And if you have a North American 3DS, you can get most of that in the New Neighbors Pack DLC. So since this one has to be purchased, there's not that much time left. So if you have a North American 3DS, you can purchase that DLC, and if you have a PAL 3DS, well, unfortunately, you don't get anything. I'm sorry, the DLC and the free updates were not localized for the PAL regions, so that's extremely unfortunate, but that's what it is. Alright guys, so with that being said, that covers pretty much everything in terms of Harvest Moon and the Wii U and 3DS eShops. To summarize, there are 4 games on the Wii U's Virtual Console, and if I had to recommend one, that would be Harvest Moon 64. The 3 Game Boy games are on the 3DS, and I would recommend picking up the third one if you're in North America. Then there's a bunch of 3DS games. They're all available in physical versions, but keep in mind that Tales of Two Towns runs better digitally than on the North American and PAL 3DS cartridge. And also don't forget to get the updates and DLC for Trio of Towns if you're interested. So I hope this video helped you if you were wondering what to pick up from the eShop. Let me know what you think of this and which games you got, even if it's not a Harvest Moon or Story of Seasons game. For me, I got a lot of Nintendo 64 games, and leave a like and subscribe if you'd like to see more content like this, and I'll see you all in the next video.